the infrastructure you don't see is the infrastructure you are standing to lose. And I want to start at 26th of February in 2022. Anybody familiar? No? At 4:04 in the morning. Yes? You had a coffee probably, yeah. So Mikhailo Fedorov, the Ukraine's Minister of Digital Transformation, sends a tweet. Not to communicate, but to survive. That same day, Elon Musk responded. Within 48 hours, the first Starlink terminals landed in Ukraine. The government was back online. The Ukrainian forces were connected again, coordinated and ready to fight for the freedom and push the Russians back. And not because they had a plan or had a scenario or ran a war game, because they had built the right relationships before the crisis with the right people and the right companies. And those relationships are being built right here in this room today. And the people in this room operate probably the most critical digital infrastructure of the Netherlands, maybe in the world. Not defense, not the government, it's you. And if we don't do that wisely and with resilience, we are at risk of losing the infrastructure you cannot see. The infrastructure that lives underground, in the air, in space, virtual space, inside our data centers. And the question is, are you prepared for that? Because I think the greatest challenge is the following. How do you create awareness? How do you build momentum? How do you get the budgets, the protocols, the processes to protect and secure the digital infrastructure that people rely on every day, a single day in their lives, in their businesses, in their government, when they cannot see it, they cannot feel it, and they cannot touch it? Maybe you do, but most people don't. We have to change that. We have to make it visible. We have to make it matter, not to frighten people, but to make them want to contribute to the resilience of our digital systems, because our lives depend on it. And also, I think it's what the people in the Netherlands and of Europe expect us to talk about today. And that's exactly what I want to talk with you about. So, a lot of you probably are, but I'm not a technician. I'm a warrior scholar. My background is within special operations. And in special operations, I always had to execute missions with not enough people, the wrong equipment, in the wrong place, at the wrong time, on assignments that often did not directly contribute to the larger mission we were all fighting for. So we had to adapt continuously and to find a way toward the end result, no matter what stood in the way between them. And I think what it teaches us is that you adapt constantly. You find the urgency, you find what matters, and you stay flexible enough to respond to the threat you did not see coming. And I think that's exactly the challenge we're facing today and also facing the people in this room. And for some of them, you may have noticed I've got a t-shirt I'm wearing today. You see it? And it says, I avoid warranties. And it belongs to Jillis Groenendijk, which is a famous Dutch ethical hardware hacker, also hardcore hacker, whose motto is exactly that. It means, don't wait for permission, open it up, figure out how it works, take control of your own systems, your own risk, and your own security. And that's exactly what I would be asking from you in this room. When it comes to the security of our digital infrastructure, of AMS-IX or IP interconnection, of the systems that keep Europe running, we cannot afford to be dependent on others to tell us what to do. We have to take ownership. And I'm not going to tell you anything about BGP or peering protocols, because you probably better know than I do, but I'm going to tell you what happens when all those systems go down, about what military commanders learn when the networks fail, the power cuts out, and the map no longer makes sense. And I start with the idea that there's more or less like a paradox in this room, because you guys operate the infrastructure that the Netherlands, Europe, and the world depends on completely. The subsea cables, satellites, data centers, energy supply that keeps all of it running. Without you, no government, no economy, no defense. And yet, you are all treated as commercial businesses and not so much as vital partners. And I think this is a problem. Because if you look at what you represent, the scale of what this room represents, for example, AMS-IX processed 35.66 exabytes of internet traffic in 2025, so one of the largest access points in the world. Dutch data centers consumes 51,000 gigawatts in 2024, 4 to 5% of the total national electricity consumption. 2 million households. Amsterdam data centers between 30 to 40% of all electricity. The Netherlands ranks 4th in Europe by number of data centers. And Amsterdam even, there's so much of them, has frozen new applications until 2035. And Europe's share of global data center capacity, that's a shame, fell from 25% in 2015 to 15% in 24, while the US and China kept growing. So we all have to do some work here, and we had better do it quickly, because if we don't, the infrastructure you cannot see will still exist. It just won't be here. It will be in Virginia or Chechen, and then we will truly not be able to see it, feel it, or touch it, because it won't be ours anymore. And I think this is not a growth problem, it's actually a concentration of vulnerability. And let me give you a military perspective on this. So military analysts are trained to ask 3 questions about any operation. First one, what's the mission? Second one, what do you need to accomplish it? Third one, what do you need to protect? And that last question produces what military people we call the defended asset list, the DAL. The things that, if lost, mean that the mission fails. And I think here's what I want you to understand. Whatever is on your defended asset list is also on someone else's strike list. So the Amsterdam Internet Exchange, the sub-cables that enter the Netherlands, the data corridors that carry the traffic of Europe, every military or geopolitical analyst in Moscow knows what they're worth. Every planner in Beijing, Pyongyang, Tehran does. They all know exactly what this infrastructure means for the Netherlands, for Europe, and for the world. And they also know exactly where it's vulnerable. The question here in the room is whether the people who operate it also know. The infrastructure that does the most is the infrastructure you see the least. Cables on the ocean floor, cooling systems in windowless halls, peering agreements buried in legal documents nobody reads. Otto, you're illegal. But only until it's gone. When this stuff is gone or destroyed or doesn't function anymore, then you will see it. And I will not walk you through all kinds of scenarios. I'm going to give you some facts. Let's start with Ukraine. What 4 years of war have taught us. Nearly 800 registered cyber attacks in the first year of the full-scale invasion. The largest offensive cyber campaign ever recorded against a single country. And that's not my number, it is the official count of the Ukraine's own cybersecurity agency, confirmed by the Dutch NCSC. In 24 alone, 398 targeted attacks on critical telecom and energy infrastructure. And there it is. Starlink started as an emergency solution, but it became routine. And in doing so, it became, as you see now, a single point of failure. First for the Ukrainians, and now for the Russians. Precisely because it worked so well. So what saved Ukraine? Not a wonder weapon, not a magic bullet, not a secret protocol. What saved Ukraine was prepared relationships, decentralization, and the courage to act quickly without perfect information. Critical government data had already been migrated to the cloud before the invasion. On the day Russia invaded, AWS delivered snowball devices to Ukraine via Poland, ruggedized hardware, each carrying up to 80 terabytes of encrypted data to move the state registers, land records, tax databases, education systems of 27 ministries out of the country into the cloud. Fedorov, the minister himself, said, Amazon AWS literally saved our digital infrastructure. Russian missiles can't destroy the cloud, especially if it's not in your country. By mid-22, more than 10 petabytes of data had been migrated. Zelensky awarded the Ukrainian National Peace Prize to AWS, Microsoft and Google, yes, those are US tech firms, for their role in keeping the Ukrainian state alive. And the thing is, this is not a Ukrainian story. The Dutch NCSC processed 4,200 incident reports from government organizations and critical infrastructure in 25 alone, a 22% increase of the year before. The Dutch Data Protection Authority received 28,000 data breach notifications that same year. That's 78 per day, every day. That the change that your organization will be hit by a cyber incident is now 1 out of 8 a year. According to the Cybersecurity Assessment in the Netherlands, and published also by our NCTV. But I would argue that what makes this room different from any other room I've been in the last few years is that the threat to this infrastructure is not only digital, it's also physical. The Dutch intelligence services have concluded that Russia is actively mapping Dutch vital maritime infrastructure at the North Sea. Nothing new under the sun. Internet cables, gas pipelines, wind farms as a preparation for disruption and sabotage. 24, the military intelligence service confirmed the first ever deliberate sabotage attack on Dutch soil. What the heck? A Russian state-backed group targeted the digital control system of a public facility in the Netherlands. This time, it did not cause damage. Chinese hackers were found to have accessed routers of smaller Dutch internet service and hosting providers. Again, read it in the Cybersecurity Assessment of the Netherlands of last year. So what does it mean? It means that they're already inside our own perimeter. The question only is, how far have they gotten? And then closer to home, and I would argue closer than you think. For example, Nord Stream, 2022, 2 pipelines blown up, largest active infrastructure sabotage in modern history. Nobody held accountable. Baltic Connector, Baltic Sea cables, 23-24, Chinese vessels suspected both times. The Yipeng 3 anchored in international waters in the neighborhood for weeks, no inspection, no consequences. Eastlink 2, 2024, power cable, Finland to Estonia, Russian Shadow Fleet tanker held responsible. January 2025, Secure, so that's the highest military leader of the NATO, orders Operation Nordic Warden, patrolling subsea infrastructure as a military priority. And then December in the morning, the Baltic seabed cable between Helsinki and Tallinn goes dark. The Fitberg seized suspected sabotage. Again. Then here, Poland, January, a few months ago, 2026, coordinated attack on 30 sites connected to the Polish energy grid. Operational technology disrupted, attributed to Electrum, a Russian-linked actor. So that's not Poland's problem, that's a European problem. And in March, the European Commission, its own cloud infrastructure, cyber attack. Data exfiltration suspected, no group named, and the investigation is ongoing. So that's a long list, but notice the pattern. Each incident is more brazen than the last one. Each time, no consequences on the actors, and that's not a coincidence. I would argue that this is like a stress test. They are mapping our responses, and sometimes our lack of it. And then when you look into the Netherlands, all our intelligence services are unanimous. Russia is actively mapping Dutch infrastructure on the seabed, internet cables, gas pipelines, wind farms in the North Sea, not out of curiosity, as preparation. And that's the official conclusion of our own intelligence services. A cyber attack on Ukraine in 2022 was routed through Dutch hosting infrastructure, maybe even here. So here it is. The Netherlands is not a bystander. The Netherlands was part of the digital battlefield. And this is exactly what the director of the Military Intelligence Service concluded in April 2025. The Russian threat against Europe is not decreasing, it is increasing, even after a potential end of the war in Ukraine. So the big question remains, what are we waiting for? The Cybersecurity Act and the Critical Entities Resilience Act were passed by the Dutch Parliament 15 April 2025, expected to enter into force this quarter. And the intelligence service put it plainly, the risks organizations systems face exist right now. So the mission also is, don't wait for law to catch up. And the threat is not longer hypothetical. I think it's here and it is also now. And then when you look into more the technology in the system itself, is what you can learn from the military. There's one fundamental difference between military systems and civilian digital infrastructure. Does anybody know what it is? No? So what's the fundamental difference between military systems and civilian digital infrastructure? Yeah, more ruggedized, yes? Sorry? Closed circuits, yeah? Pricing, yeah, they're more expensive, yeah. Yeah, true statement there, yes. But military systems are purposely built on the assumption that components will fail. Civilian digital infrastructure is built on the assumption that they won't. And here you got a dead German general, they're always right, Clausewitz, and he says something like this. Everything in war is simple, but even the simplest thing is difficult, because in conflict and war, there's always friction. And friction is what happens when your plan meets reality. And friction is exactly what this infrastructure will face, the digital civilian infrastructure, when the pressure comes. And an example, take for example a helicopter. A civilian helicopter has every critical system duplicated, mechanical and hydraulical, those are the old ones, or hydraulical and electrical. You can ask that to Delta Airlines or KLM when you fly to the other side. They got 2 layers. A military helicopter has at least 4. So it costs more, it's heavier, it's less efficient in peacetime, and what it does, it creates less lifts. So you can take less people with you. But you know what it can? It can take hits. It's built to absorb friction. And so here, more or less my question to the room. Let's take a look at the Amsterdam Internet Exchange. Is civilian helicopter or is the military one? Is our digital infrastructure built with 2 layers or 4 more? Can it absorb hits? Or will the first real shock bring it down? I think there are more like three things, not lessons, that kind of bullshit, I don't believe in that. I think there are three things which are more or less true and valuable. And it's like that redundancy, so you have like more layers of the same stuff in it, is not a cost measure, because then you always get rid of it. It's actually a doctrine, a way of doing things. No system should depend on a single route, a single vendor, a single decision maker, not in the military, so not for the F-35 and the software which is in it, or in our networks. What I said, Starlink worked perfectly, and that's exactly why it became the risk. When one solution works so well that everybody relies on, you no longer have a backup, you have a single point of failure. That's why I'm wearing the shirt. Void the warranty. Build the alternatives before you need it. So in the Netherlands, we're all happy that Kindle is not allowed to buy Solvinity. The bigger question, when you look one layer down, what is the solution now? So how are we going to solve it? Because Solvinity and DigiD, all our digital secure infrastructure, is still out there. And I think if I could ask you or bring one message back to your boardrooms or your discussion with your teams, is this one. Redundancy is not just a security measure. In a world where nobody can predict exactly what is coming, and we have just spent 20 minutes establishing that nobody can, redundancy is actually a competitive advantage. Customers, partners, governments are increasingly asking, who can I trust to stay online when it gets hit hard? Who has built the systems to absorb shocks? The answer to that question is becoming a reason to choose you and not the other one. And resilience is turning into a commercial differentiator. And the organizations that understand that first will have a significant edge on those that don't. And then the second one, mission command. Anybody military experiences? Mission command? Never heard of? Mission command is a military leadership doctrine built on a simple truth. When you launch an operation, you have approximately 20% of all the relevant information you need to plan and execute that operation. The other 80% only becomes available once the helicopter lands, once the first shot is fired, once the first data packets start flowing through your networks. So what do? You give people the mission, the intent, the boundaries, and then you trust them to act. Decentralized, without waiting for permission, because there's no time to go back up the chain, brief the board, build a PowerPoint, stand in front of the whiteboard, wait for everyone to nod before you take a countermeasure. And BGP, you guys know it, is actually mission command. It is the internet's way of saying, here is the goal, get the data from A to B, figure out the route yourself. If one path fails, find another one. No central authority, no approval required, just execute. The protocol understands this. The question is whether our organizations do. Because who decides in your organization when the central system goes down? Is that person prepared? Do they have authority to act? And the third truth is that preparation starts in peacetime. The relationships that saved Ukraine were built before the crisis occurred, not after. Fedorov didn't need to Google who to call in February 2022. He already knew. The number was already in his phone. That's not luck or coincidence, that's a doctrine. And this is no longer just military insight, it's now official policy at every level. Let's look at NATO, EU, and Netherlands. NATO, at the Washington Summit 2024, all allies pledged to integrate civilian planning into national collective defense planning in peacetime, in crisis, and in conflict. And you could decide for yourself where we are now, peacetime, crisis, or conflict. Public-private partnership is no longer an option or a recipe on a menu card. It's a commitment made by the highest level of the alliance. Then the EU. March 25, the European Commission launched its Preparedness Union strategy. Anybody read it? Just feed it in cloth and you get everything out of it for you. Now, I think it's EU is too long, but I think it's relevant. Just take a look at the digital paragraphs. Its central message, here you have it, preparedness must be woven into the fabric of our societies. It sets minimum criteria for essential services, including telecommunications, calls for civil and military corporations across the board. So that goes further than just implementing NIS2. Then the Netherlands, December 24, Cabinet Schoof sent the resilience, weerbaarheidsletter, brief to Parliament. It stated explicitly, vital infrastructure must be robust and multiply redundant. This applies above all to the systems on which everything else depends, mobile communications, networks and internet included. Here we go. NATO says it, EU says it, the Dutch government says it. The question is not whether the policy exists, the question is whether the people who operate these infrastructure are acting on it, on a foreign or private control. And that's all of you. And the Dutch digitalization strategy for the Dutch people, the NDS, lists digital resilience as priority number 5. I always start from the back, so that's one of the most important ones. And it's there, it's the policy. But policy without people behind it is just paper. And paper can wait a long time. Who makes sure that priority is embedded in the infrastructure structure this room operates? That's also you. And I started my brief with a tweet sent at 4:04 in the morning, a minister, a phone, a relationship built before the crisis. And actually, that's the whole story. Not the technology, not the legislation, but the relationship, the preparation, and the decision made in peacetime that determined what was possible when you're under fire. And if you look at the room and you look around, the knowledge is here. The expertise is also here. The people, or they're here tomorrow, if you talk about technology, the people who understand this infrastructure better than any government, any military, any regulator, they are all in this room today. And that's not nothing. It's pretty positive. It's actually everything. So NATO, EU, Dutch government, they all said it and said the same thing in the last 12 months. Prepare now, build relationships now, make your infrastructure redundant now. And here is what I believe. If this sector, and maybe you already have done it, decides to act, not because legislation requires it, but because we understand what is at stake, and that the next time someone tests or responds, the answer will not be silence, it will be a network that took the hit but kept running. And Nassim Taleb calls it anti-fragile. It's not just resilient, it can absorb a shock. It's not just surviving the shock, but it's actually coming out stronger because of it. Systems that learn from pressure, infrastructure that improves under attack. And that's what we can build. And when we do so, something else happens. Partners choose us. Customers choose us. The 10% of global digital capacity that Europe has lost to the US and China over the last decade will start coming back. Because resilience, redundancy, and yes, sometimes building things twice, it turns out that it's not a cost. It's a competitive advantage. And I would even argue it's a growth strategy. And I suspect that Mario Draghi would agree. And the infrastructure you don't protect is the infrastructure you stand to lose. But the infrastructure we do protect and strengthen is the infrastructure the world will want to use. Thank you very much.
Gijs, one question before you leave. I have several, but I think we're lacking time.
Ooh.
You initiated in your time as State Secretary I'm going to try to pronounce it correctly, the Defense Digital Transformation Strategy.
Yes.
If you if you would look back on your initiating phase and you launched this, what lessons can we learn from that strategy looking at this network, but also the network here in the Netherlands and in Europe? Gijs.
Yeah, I think the first one built a story. So my biggest challenge was that if you look at defense, you looked at the military, that everything which has to do with networks, with IT or data, is not considered combat power or readiness. It's considered services or stuff you need to get stuff done and that kind of stuff. So the first thing we did, I did it with the CIO of the Department of Defense, Jeroen van der Vlucht. He's a great guy. He really understands it well. Is we changed the story. So we said, like, combat power or readiness is not just steel, tanks, and bullets. It's bits and bytes, and it's bits and bytes in a more progressing form. I think that's the first one. You have to build a story, and it's what I'm trying to tell you. If you can't see it, you can't feel it, you can't touch it, like society, the people, the budgets, the politicians, and we just talked about it, will not actually embrace it. So we have to make that more visible. I think the second part is that if you look at government, but also companies, but especially at governments, is that the adoption of technology of IT has a really, really bad track record. So, and what you see now is that we have all kinds of best practices, also in the government. So the MOD, Ministry of Defense in the Netherlands, we launched, like, I would argue even like 2 years ago, DevGPT. So a GPT which runs exactly within your own secured space. So that's a great thing. I would argue the other thing is that we're talking a lot about cloud capabilities and that kind of stuff, yep. Sovereign, you know, all of the stuff, sovereign controls. So half a year ago, we signed a deal with KPN Netherlands, Thales Netherlands, KPN, and Google as the operating platform, yes, with a lot of sovereign controls in there, to start building the first parts of sovereign or Dutch sovereign stack capability. So that's what I think. So you have to build a story and tell it, make it visible. Secondly, make sure that you have success and make it tangible enough that people actually want to talk about it, put some money in, and you attract bright people to keep our capabilities safe. I would argue that.
Thank you, Gijs Tuinman. Thank you. Thank you.